City lights, country roads. A burned-out city doctor returns home and meets the girl she left behind, now the town's only vet. Before we get to our women-loving women story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to see more like this. City lights, country roads. Chapter 1, The Return. The rental car's engine wheezed as it climbed the final hill into Milbrook Valley, a sound that perfectly matched the exhaustion radiating through Dr. Skye Morrison's bones. Through the windshield, she watched familiar landmarks emerge from the morning mist: the old stone bridge, the weathered barn with its faded mail pouch tobacco advertisement, the cluster of white church steeples piercing the horizon like prayer flags. 10 years. Had it really been that long since she'd driven this road? The radio crackled with static as she descended into the valley, the classical music from the city station fading into nothing. She reached over and snapped it off, letting the silence fill the car. Outside, October painted the hills in fierce oranges and deep crimsons, a riot of color that made her chest tighten unexpectedly. In Manhattan, autumn meant designer scarves and pumpkin spice lattes. Here, it meant the earth itself was on fire. Skye's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the steering wheel. The panic attacks had started 3 months ago, sudden, crushing episodes that left her gasping in hospital supply closets, her white coat drenched in sweat. The final one had happened during a cardiac surgery, her vision tunneling until the attending had to take over. The mandatory leave of absence had followed swiftly after. Burnout, the department head had said with clinical detachment. Take some time. Get your head straight. So here she was, running home with her tail between her legs to the place she'd sworn she'd never return to. The irony wasn't lost on her. The girl who'd escaped Milbrook Valley to save lives in the big city had ended up needing to be saved herself. Main Street looked smaller than her memories painted it. The hardware store still had the same sun-faded awning, the diner still boasted world's best pie in peeling letters across its window. But there were changes too: a yoga studio where the old pharmacy used to be, a coffee shop with Edison bulb lighting that looked transplanted from Brooklyn. Even small towns weren't immune to gentrification, apparently. Skye pulled into the gravel driveway of her childhood home, a 2-story farmhouse that had seen better decades. Her mother had left it to her when she passed 2 years ago. Another funeral Skye had been too busy to attend properly, flying in for the service and back to New York the same day. The guilt sat in her stomach like a stone. She sat in the car for a long moment, staring at the peeling white paint and sagging front porch. This was supposed to be temporary. Just long enough to clear her head, maybe sell the house, figure out her next move. 6 months, tops. The screen door banged open, and Mrs. Chen from next door appeared on her porch, waving enthusiastically. Skye? Skye Morrison, is that you? Well, I'll be. Welcome home, honey. Home. The word felt foreign in her mouth as she waved back and climbed out of the car. She'd spent the last 15 years building a life as far from here as possible. But as she breathed in the crisp mountain air, tinged with wood smoke and the earthy scent of fallen leaves, something deep in her chest began to unknot. Maybe that was the problem. She'd been holding her breath for 15 years. Chapter 2, Unexpected Encounters. The next morning, Skye woke to silence so profound it felt oppressive. No sirens, no car horns, no neighbors arguing through thin apartment walls. Just the whisper of wind through the ancient oak outside her bedroom window and the distant lowing of cattle. She'd forgotten how quiet the country could be. After a breakfast of stale cereal, she'd need to grocery shop soon. Skye decided to walk into town. The morning air was sharp and clean, making her lungs work harder than they had in years. In the city, she lived in a constant state of shallow breathing, as if the air itself was too precious to waste. The walk took 20 minutes, past fields dotted with Holstein cows and farmhouses that looked unchanged since her childhood. She passed the old swimming hole where she'd spent countless summer afternoons, the rope swing still hanging from the massive willow, though the rope looked newer. Some traditions endured. Main Street was busier than she'd expected for a Tuesday morning. Pickup trucks angled parked in front of the feed store, a small crowd gathered outside the post office. As she approached, she caught fragments of concerned conversation. Found her this morning, poor thing. Never seen anything like it. Lucky Doc Rebecca was available. Doc Rebecca. The name sent an unexpected jolt through Skye's chest. It couldn't be. Rebecca Walsh had been planning to study literature at Oberlin, had talked about moving to Portland or Seattle, somewhere with bookstores and coffee culture and people who understood that there was a whole world beyond these hills. "Excuse me," Skye said to a woman she didn't recognize. "What happened?" "Oh, honey, are you new in town? There was an accident up at the Morrison place. Oh my goodness, are you related to Martha Morrison?" "You have her eyes." "She was my mother." "I'm so sorry for your loss, dear." "I'm Carol Peters. My husband runs the hardware store." The woman's expression shifted to one of motherly concern. "Anyway, there was an accident with one of the horses up at the riding stable. Poor animal got tangled in some old barbed wire. Doc Rebecca's been working on her for hours." Skye's medical instincts kicked in automatically. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough. The cuts are deep, and the horse lost a lot of blood. But if anyone can save her, it's our Rebecca. That girl has magic hands when it comes to animals." "Our Rebecca." The possessive pronoun rankled for reasons Skye didn't want to examine. "Where is she?" "The vet, I mean. The old Miller place, about 2 miles out on Valley Road. But I wouldn't go bothering her now, she's got her hands full." Skye thanked the woman and continued down Main Street, but her feet seemed to have developed a mind of their own. Instead of browsing the shops as she'd planned, she found herself walking back toward home, then past it, following the familiar curves of Valley Road. The Miller place had been converted into a veterinary clinic, she realized as she approached. A simple wooden sign hung from a post, "Valley Animal Care, Rebecca Walsh, DVM." A few cars were parked in what used to be the front yard, and she could see lights on in what must have been the converted barn. She shouldn't go in. She had no business being here, no reason to interrupt except curiosity and some misguided sense of nostalgia. But before she could talk herself out of it, her feet were carrying her up the gravel path to the barn doors. The smell hit her first, antiseptic and hay and something else, something metallic. Blood. Through the open door, she could see a large examination area that had clearly been custom-built. And there, bent over an examination table, was a figure that made her heart skip in recognition. Rebecca Walsh had grown into herself in the years since high school. Her dark hair was shorter now, pulled back in a practical ponytail that revealed the elegant line of her neck. She wore scrubs and latex gloves, her attention completely focused on the injured horse lying sedated on the table. Her movements were precise, confident, the hands of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. "Hand me the saline, would you, Jenny?" Rebecca said without looking up. A young woman, presumably Jenny, moved to comply, but she was on the far side of the table, and the 4-bag Rebecca needed was closer to where Skye stood in the doorway. Medical training overrode social awkwardness. Skye stepped forward and grabbed the saline bag, extending it toward the table. "Here." Rebecca's head snapped up, and their eyes met for the first time in 10 years. Time seemed to suspend itself in that moment. Rebecca's eyes, still that impossible shade of green, like summer leaves, widened with shock. The saline bag hung in the air between them, Skye's hand extended, Rebecca frozen mid-suture. "Skye?" Rebecca's voice was barely above a whisper. "Hi, Becca." The old nickname slipped out before she could stop it, and she watched something flicker across Rebecca's face, surprise, pleasure, pain. It was gone too quickly to read. Rebecca started to speak, then seemed to remember where she was. Her eyes dropped back to her patient, her professional mask sliding back into place. "Jenny, can you take the saline?" "I need to finish the suture line." The moment broke, and the world resumed its normal speed. But as Skye handed over the 4-bag and stepped back, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in the space between heartbeats. The operation took another hour. Skye found herself lingering in the doorway, ostensibly watching the procedure but really watching Rebecca work. Her movements were economical and sure, her voice gentle when she spoke to the sedated mare. This was Rebecca in her element, confident, capable, completely different from the uncertain teenager Skye remembered. "There," Rebecca said finally, stepping back from the table. "That should do it. Jenny, let's get her moved to recovery. Keep an eye on those vitals, and call me if anything changes." "Yes, document." Jenny began cleaning up the surgical area with the efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. Rebecca peeled off her gloves and finally looked directly at Skye again. "Walk with me?" They stepped outside into the crisp October air. Rebecca leaned against the porch railing and studied Skye's face with the same intensity she'd just applied to her surgical sutures. "I heard you were back in town," Rebecca said. "Mrs. Chen called everyone she knows within 10 minutes of seeing you pull up. Some things never change." "No, they don't." Rebecca's voice was carefully neutral. "How long are you staying?" "I'm not sure. A few months, maybe. I'm taking some time off from the hospital." "Time off?" The Skye Morrison I knew wouldn't take time off if she was hemorrhaging. The observation was too accurate to be comfortable. "People change." "Do they?" Rebecca's green eyes searched her face. "You look tired." "Thanks. Really know how to make a girl feel welcome." A ghost of a smile touched Rebecca's lips, the same crooked smile that had made Skye's 15-year-old heart skip beats. "Sorry. Occupational hazard. I spend so much time with animals that my bedside manner with humans has gotten rusty." "Your bedside manner was always just fine." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with memory. Rebecca's cheeks flushed pink, and she looked away. "I should get back inside. Check on our patient." "Of course." Skye pushed herself away from the porch railing. "It was good to see you, Becca. You've done well for yourself." "Skye." Rebecca's voice stopped her before she could take a step. "I'm glad you're home." The simple words hit harder than they should have. Skye nodded, not trusting her voice, and walked back down the gravel path. But she could feel Rebecca watching her until she disappeared around the bend in the road. That night, she lay awake in her childhood bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a rabbit. Or maybe a cloud. She and Rebecca used to lie in this same bed during sleepovers, making up stories about the shapes they saw in that stain. She'd been so sure, at 18, that she knew exactly what she wanted. Medical school, residency in a big city, a life that mattered on a scale larger than Milbrook Valley. She'd mapped out her entire future with the confidence of youth, never doubting that bigger meant better, that leaving meant growing. But lying here now, she wondered if she'd been running towards something or away from it. Chapter 3, Old Wounds. Skye spent the next few days settling into a routine that felt both familiar and strange. Morning coffee on the front porch, reading medical journals she'd downloaded but couldn't quite focus on. Walks through town where half the people remembered her and the other half politely pretended they didn't recognize the girl who'd left so dramatically for bigger things. She was coming back from the grocery store Thursday afternoon when she saw Rebecca's truck parked in front of the house. Rebecca herself was sitting on the front steps, a thermos beside her and a book in her lap. "Hey," Rebecca said, looking up as Skye approached with her bags. "Hope you don't mind the ambush. I brought coffee." She held up the thermos. "Figured you might not have gotten around to buying a decent coffee maker yet." "You figured right." Skye set down her groceries and settled beside Rebecca on the steps. "What gave it away?" "The fact that you bought instant coffee. I saw it in your cart at Murphy's." "You were spying on my groceries?" "Small town. Everyone sees everything." Rebecca poured coffee into 2 cups that appeared from nowhere. "Besides, I remember how you used to complain about your mom's coffee. Said it was weak enough to see through." The coffee was perfect, rich and hot and exactly what she needed. "Thank you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the light change on the hills. Rebecca's book was face down on the step between them, All the Light We Cannot See. Literature, not veterinary texts. Good book? Skye asked. Beautiful. Heartbreaking. Rebecca's fingers traced the cover. I always meant to read more fiction, but work tends to take over. I know the feeling. Do you? Rebecca's voice was carefully casual. Because from what I heard, you were living the dream. Manhattan emergency room, saving lives, making a difference. There was something underneath the words, an edge that made Skye look at her more carefully. It wasn't exactly the dream I thought it would be. But you made it out. That's what mattered, right? Rebecca. I'm sorry. Rebecca held up a hand. That wasn't fair. I'm glad you found what you were looking for. Did I, though? The question surprised them both. Rebecca's green eyes softened, and she leaned back against the porch post. Tell me, she said simply. So Skye did. She found herself talking about the endless shifts, the bureaucracy, the way the city hospital had felt more like a factory than a place of healing. About how she'd started drinking too much coffee and sleeping too little, how her relationships had become casualties of her ambition. About the panic attacks and the mandatory leave and the growing certainty that somewhere along the way, she'd lost herself. Rebecca listened without interruption, her face grave. When Skye finally wound down, they sat in silence again. I always wondered, Rebecca said eventually, if you ever missed it here. I tried not to. Because it was easier that way? Skye looked at her sharply. Because I had to move forward. I couldn't spend my life looking back. Even when looking back might have meant looking back at me? The words hit like a physical blow. Skye's breath caught, and she found herself staring at Rebecca's profile, the strong line of her jaw, the way the afternoon light caught gold threads in her dark hair. Becca. I waited for you. Rebecca's voice was quiet but steady. Did you know that? After graduation, I deferred Oberlin for a year. I told myself it was to save money, but really I was waiting to see if you'd come back. If you'd change your mind. I couldn't. You knew I couldn't. I knew you wouldn't. There's a difference. Rebecca turned to face her fully. I'm not saying this to make you feel guilty, Skye. I never got to say it. And now you're here, and I'm 32 years old, and I'm tired of carrying around things I should have said a decade ago. Skye's chest felt tight, the familiar sensation that preceded her panic attacks. But this was different, not the crushing weight of anxiety but something else, something that felt like grief. I thought about you, she whispered. More than I should have. But not enough to call. Or write. Or visit when your mother. Rebecca stopped herself, shaking her head. I'm sorry. That's not fair either. No, it is fair. Skye's voice was thick. I should have come back for Mom's funeral properly. I should have, God, Becca, I should have done a lot of things differently. We all should have. Rebecca reached over and squeezed Skye's hand briefly. But we can't change the past. We can only decide what to do with right now. They sat with that truth as shadows lengthened across the valley. Finally, Rebecca gathered up her thermos and book. I should go. Mrs. Patterson's cat has been having digestive issues, and I promised I'd stop by. She paused at the bottom of the steps. There's a harvest festival this weekend at the community center. Nothing fancy, just food and music and people being people. You should come. I don't know if that's a good idea. Why not? Because people will stare. And whisper. And ask me questions I don't have answers to. Rebecca smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Let them stare. You never cared what people thought before. That was different. I was different. Maybe. Or maybe you just forgot who you were underneath all those expectations you put on yourself. Rebecca started toward her truck, then turned back. 8 o'clock Saturday. I'll save you a dance. She drove away before Skye could protest that she hadn't agreed to come. But as she sat on the porch watching the taillights disappear, she realized she was already wondering what she might wear. Chapter 4, The Festival. Saturday evening found Skye standing in front of her childhood bedroom mirror, trying on her third outfit. The first had been too formal, a silk blouse that screamed city doctor trying too hard. The second too casual, jeans that made her look like she was 18 again. She'd finally settled on a simple green sweater that brought out her eyes and dark jeans that fit well without being too precious about it. She was stalling, and she knew it. The community center was a 5-minute drive from the house, but Skye took the long way, circling past the old Methodist church and down by the creek. Through the center's windows, she could see warm light spilling out, silhouettes moving in what looked like organized chaos. A bluegrass band was setting up on a small stage, and the smell of apple cider and cinnamon rolls drifted through the parking lot. She sat in her car for 10 minutes, watching people arrive. Families with small children, teenagers in carefully curated casual clothes, older couples who'd probably been coming to these festivals for decades. Everyone seemed to know everyone else, conversations flowing easily across generations and social lines in a way that city life rarely allowed. Just go in, she told herself. You can always leave. But as she approached the entrance, she heard a familiar voice behind her. Well, if it isn't Skye Morrison. She turned to find David Chen, Mrs. Chen's son, walking up with a woman she didn't recognize and 2 small children in tow. David looked older but essentially unchanged, still wearing the easy smile that had made him pop. She had the comfortable confidence of someone who belonged here, who was woven into the fabric of this place in a way Skye had never been. Even in high school, Skye had been the ambitious one, the one with her eyes on the horizon. Rebecca had been the one who saw beauty in the details, who found poetry in the everyday rhythms of small-town life. You seem happy, Skye observed as Rebecca ladled cider into 2 cups. I am, mostly. Rebecca handed her a cup, their fingers brushing in the exchange. It took me a while to figure out that happiness doesn't always look like what you think it should. What do you mean? I spent years trying to want the things I thought I should want. Travel, big city life, a career that impressed people at cocktail parties. But it turns out I'm happiest when I'm elbow-deep in hay, delivering a foal at 3 a.m. Rebecca's smile was self-deprecating. Not exactly the stuff of romantic comedies. I think it sounds perfect, Skye said, and meant it. The band struck up a lively tune, and couples began filtering onto the dance floor. Rebecca's eyes followed them, and Skye saw something wistful in her expression. You said something about saving me a dance, Skye said impulsively. Rebecca's eyebrows rose. I did. Though I should warn you, I'm not exactly Fred Astaire. Neither am I. We'll figure it out. They set down their cups and made their way to the edge of the dance floor. Rebecca held out her hand, and Skye took it, feeling the calloused warmth of her palm. Rebecca's other hand settled at her waist, and Skye found herself remembering school dances where they'd been too nervous to stand this close, too aware of watching eyes and small-town expectations. They swayed together as the band played something slow and sweet, not quite dancing but not quite standing still either. Rebecca smelled like vanilla and something earthy, hay, maybe, or the outdoors. Her body was warm and solid against Skye's, reassuringly real after so many years of memory. This is nice, Rebecca murmured, her breath warm against Skye's ear. It is. I missed you, Rebecca said suddenly. I know I shouldn't say that, and I know it's complicated, but I did. I missed you so much sometimes it felt like losing a limb. Skye's arms tightened around Rebecca's waist. I missed you too. They danced through 2 more songs, barely moving, just holding each other in the middle of a crowded room full of people who'd known them both since they were children. Skye was dimly aware of eyes on them, of whispered conversations, but for once she didn't care. Let them talk. Let them speculate. This moment was hers. The spell broke when the band announced they were taking a break. Rebecca stepped back, her cheeks flushed, and Skye immediately missed the warmth of her body. Rebecca gestured vaguely toward the other side of the room. Harold's been giving me meaningful looks. I promised Mrs. Patterson. Of course. Rebecca started to walk away, then turned back. Tomorrow's Sunday. I don't suppose you'd like to have dinner? Nothing fancy, just dinner. I'd like that. Good. 6 o'clock? My place? Skye nodded, not trusting her voice. She watched Rebecca walk away, noting how other people gravitated toward her, how easily she moved through the crowd. This was Rebecca's world now, and she was the sun at the center of it. The question was there room for Skye in that orbit? Chapter 5, Sunday Dinner. Sunday afternoon, Skye found herself standing in the wine aisle of Murphy's Market, staring at a selection that hadn't been updated since the Clinton administration. She'd driven to 3 different stores looking for something that didn't have a screw cap, finally settling on a bottle of Pinot Noir that looked respectable enough. She was nervous, which was ridiculous. This was Rebecca, the girl she'd shared her deepest secrets with, the person who'd known her better than anyone. But that was the problem, wasn't it? The girl she'd known was gone, replaced by this confident, capable woman who'd built a life that didn't need Skye in it. Rebecca's house was a small craftsman bungalow on the outskirts of town, with a wraparound porch and flower boxes that even in late October showed signs of careful tending. 2 cats, one orange, one gray, watched Skye from the porch railing with the suspicious dignity of longtime residents. Don't mind the welcoming committee, Rebecca said, opening the door before Skye could knock. That's Hemingway and Fitzgerald. They're judgmental but mostly harmless. She'd changed from her festival dress into jeans and a soft sweater that made her eyes look even greener. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she wasn't wearing makeup. She looked younger this way, more like the girl Skye remembered. I brought wine, Skye said, holding up the bottle. Perfect. I made my grandmother's pot roast, which pairs well with either wine or whiskey, depending on how brave you're feeling. The house was warm and inviting, with built-in bookshelves and hardwood floors that creaked pleasantly underfoot. The living room was dominated by a stone fireplace where a small fire crackled, and every surface seemed to hold either books or plants or both. It was exactly the kind of home Skye had never thought she wanted, cozy, settled, permanent. This is beautiful, she said, meaning it. Thanks. It took me 3 years to convince old Mr. Hartley to sell it to me. He was convinced I'd tear it down and build something modern. Rebecca led her toward the kitchen, which smelled like herbs and slow-cooked beef. Turns out he just wanted to make sure it went to someone who'd love it. And do you? Love it? Every creaky floorboard and drafty window. Rebecca pulled the wine bottle from Skye's hands and began searching for a corkscrew. It's the first place that's ever felt completely mine, you know? In college, I lived in dorms and apartments that could have belonged to anyone. But this house, it fits. Skye watched Rebecca move efficiently around the kitchen, pulling dishes from the oven, stirring something on the stovetop. There was an easy confidence in her movements, the unconscious grace of someone comfortable in their own skin. When had that happened? In high school, Rebecca had been all sharp elbows and uncertainty, brilliant but convinced she wasn't quite good enough for the world beyond Milbrook Valley. Can I help with anything? Just keep me company. Dinner's almost ready. They talked easily while Rebecca finished cooking, safe topics like the weather and mutual acquaintances and the changes in town since Skye had left. But underneath the casual conversation was an awareness, a charged tension that had nothing to do with the wine they were sharing. Dinner was perfect, the pot roast falling apart at the touch of a fork, vegetables that tasted like they'd come from an actual garden rather than a grocery store. Rebecca was a good cook, Skye realized with surprise. When had she learned to do that? This is incredible, Skye said around a bite of perfectly seasoned carrots. Where did you learn to cook like this? Necessity, mostly. When you work odd hours and live alone, you either learn to cook or survive on takeout forever. Rebecca refilled their wine glasses. Plus, my grandmother made me promise I'd learn at least 10 recipes before she died. Said it was the difference between surviving and living. Smart woman. She was. She's the one who talked me into veterinary school, actually. Said the world had enough English majors and not enough people who understood that animals were just as important as humans. She was right about that too. Rebecca studied Skye's face in the candlelight. What about you? Do you cook? I heat things up. There's a difference. Skye laughed, but it came out hollow. I used to think I was too busy for cooking. Too important. Funny how you can convince yourself that basic human needs are optional. Is that what happened? In New York? Skye set down her fork and reached for her wine glass, buying time. I got lost, I think. Somewhere between medical school and residency and trying to prove I belonged in a world that didn't particularly want me there. What do you mean? I was good at my job. Better than good. But I was also the girl from nowhere, the scholarship kid who didn't know which fork to use at department dinners. I spent so much energy trying to fit in that I forgot why I wanted to be a doctor in the first place. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, turning her wine glass between her fingers. Do you remember what you used to say when we were kids? About why you wanted to be a doctor? Because people were hurt and I wanted to fix them. Simple as that. Too simple, it turns out. Fixing people is messier than I thought. More complicated. And the system. God, Becca, the system is so broken. I was spending more time fighting insurance companies than treating patients. More time documenting procedures than actually performing them. So you burned out. Spectacularly. Skye drained her wine glass. Panic attacks during surgery. Not exactly career-enhancing. I'm sorry. Don't be. It needed to happen. I just wish it had happened before I wasted 15 years chasing something that was never going to make me happy. Rebecca reached across the table and covered Skye's hand with hers. Her skin was warm, slightly rough from work. It wasn't wasted if it brought you home. Is that what this is? Home? I don't know. Is it? They looked at each other across the small table, the question hanging in the air between them. The fire in the living room had died down to embers, and outside the windows, darkness was complete except for the scattered lights of farmhouses in the distance. I used to dream about leaving this place, Skye said finally. Couldn't wait to shake the dust off my feet and never look back. And now? Now I'm not sure what I was running from. Or toward, for that matter. Rebecca squeezed her hand gently. Maybe that's okay. Maybe you don't have to have all the answers right now. Since when did you become the wise one? Since I spent 10 years learning that not all questions need immediate answers. Rebecca stood and began clearing the table. Some things are worth waiting for. Worth figuring out slowly. Skye helped with the dishes, their bodies brushing occasionally in the small kitchen. Each casual touch sent electricity up her spine, and she found herself hyper-aware of Rebecca's proximity, the sound of her breathing, the way she hummed softly under her breath while she worked. Thank you for dinner, Skye said when the last dish was dried and put away. And for this. Whatever this is. It's whatever we want it to be. And what do you want it to be? Rebecca turned to face her fully, her green eyes serious. Honestly? I want it to be the second chance I never thought I'd get. But only if that's what you want too. I won't push, Skye. I won't be the reason you run away again. The words hit like a physical blow, and Skye realized that's exactly what she'd been doing, planning her escape even as she sat in Rebecca's warm kitchen, already cataloging reasons why this couldn't work, why she'd have to leave again. I don't want to run, she whispered. Then don't. Rebecca stepped closer, close enough that Skye could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, could smell her shampoo and the lingering scent of vanilla. Close enough that when Rebecca lifted her hand to cup Skye's cheek, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. I've wanted to do this since the moment I saw you in my clinic, Rebecca murmured. What's stopping you? Instead of answering, Rebecca leaned in and kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, a question more than a statement. But when Skye kissed her back, her hands tangling in Rebecca's hair, It deepened into something that felt like coming home and falling off a cliff at the same time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rebecca rested her forehead against Skye's. "Stay," she whispered. "Not forever. Not until you figure everything out. Just stay tonight." Skye's answer was another kiss, deeper this time, full of 10 years of longing and regret and hope. Outside, the October wind rattled the windows, but inside Rebecca's small house, everything was warm and golden and exactly where it needed to be. Chapter 6, Morning Light. Skye woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains and the sound of coffee brewing downstairs. For a moment, she was disoriented. The room was wrong, the light was wrong, the silence was too complete. Then memory flooded back, Rebecca's hands in her hair, whispered endearments, the feeling of coming apart and being put back together in entirely new ways. She stretched, feeling muscles she'd forgotten she had, and found Rebecca's side of the bed still warm but empty. The smell of bacon drifted up from the kitchen, along with Rebecca's voice talking to someone, the cats, probably, from the one-sided nature of the conversation. Skye pulled on Rebecca's discarded sweater from the night before and padded barefoot down the stairs. She found Rebecca at the stove, hair twisted up in a messy bun, wearing an oversized t-shirt and flannel pajama pants. Hemingway and Fitzgerald sat at her feet like furry sentinels, clearly expecting their share of the bacon. "Morning," Skye said softly. Rebecca turned, her face lighting up with a smile that made Skye's chest tighten with something that might have been happiness. "Morning. I was wondering if you'd sneak out while I was cooking. The thought crossed my mind. But you didn't. The bacon smelled too good." Skye wrapped her arms around Rebecca's waist from behind, pressing her face into the curve of Rebecca's neck. She smelled like sleep and soap and something indefinably warm. "Plus, I think your cats would have hunted me down. They're very protective of their territory." Rebecca leaned back into the embrace. "Coffee's on the counter if you want some." They ate breakfast on the back porch, wrapped in an old quilt Rebecca pulled from a closet, watching the sun burn off the morning mist in the valley below. The cats had been bribed with bacon scraps and were now sprawled in patches of sunlight, purring with contentment. "I have to ask," Skye said, breaking a comfortable silence. "What happens now? What do you want to happen?" "I don't know. That's the problem." Skye set down her coffee cup and turned to face Rebecca. "Last night was... God, Becca, last night was everything I didn't know I needed. But I'm still the same person who had a panic attack during surgery 3 months ago. I'm still trying to figure out who I am when I'm not Dr. Morrison, trauma surgeon extraordinaire." Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, watching a hawk circle lazily overhead. "Do you remember senior year, when you were applying to colleges?" "Of course. You had that acceptance letter from Georgetown. Full scholarship, pre-med track, everything you dreamed of. But you also had that acceptance from state, where you could have stayed closer to home, maybe studied something else." Skye frowned, not sure where this was going. "I chose Georgetown. You know that." "You did. But do you remember what you said when I asked you why?" "That Georgetown was the better opportunity. Better reputation, better connections. That's what you told everyone else." Rebecca's green eyes were steady, gentle. "But what you told me was that you were terrified you'd choose state for the wrong reasons. That you'd stay because it was easier, not because it was right." The memory came flooding back, sitting in the same spot 18 years ago, Rebecca beside her, both of them crying about the future that was rushing toward them like a freight train. "You were afraid," Rebecca continued, "that if you stayed, you'd never know who you could become. That you'd settle for safe instead of reaching for something bigger." "I remember." "Well, now I'm the one who's afraid." Rebecca's voice was steady but her hands trembled slightly. "I'm afraid you'll stay for the wrong reasons this time. That you'll choose easy over right because you're hurt and scared and I happen to be here." The words hit like cold water. Skye pulled back, studying Rebecca's face. "Is that what you think this is? Me settling? I don't know. That's what scares me." Rebecca's smile was sad. I love you, Skye. I've loved you since we were 16 years old and you kissed me behind the gymnasium after homecoming. But I won't be your fallback plan. I won't be the thing you choose because everything else fell apart. Becca. Let me finish. Rebecca took her hands, holding them gently. If you stay, I want it to be because this is where you want to build a life. Not because you're running from something, but because you're running toward something. Toward me, toward us, toward the person you want to become. Skye felt tears prick her eyes. And if I'm not sure yet? If I need time to figure it out? Then you take the time you need. I'll be here. What if I decide to leave again? Then I'll help you pack. Rebecca's voice was steady, but Skye could see the pain in her eyes. I'd rather have whatever time we can have than spend the rest of my life wondering what if. They sat in silence, hands clasped, watching the valley wake up below them. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimed the hour, 10 o'clock, late for a Sunday morning but perfect for this moment suspended between past and future. I need to tell you something, Skye said finally. About why I really came back. Rebecca nodded, waiting. The panic attacks, they weren't just about burnout. They were about you. About this place. About the fact that I'd spent 15 years trying to forget everything I'd left behind, and it was eating me alive. What do you mean? I mean I never got over you. The words came out in a rush, like a dam breaking. I tried. God knows I tried. I dated other people, had relationships, told myself I was happy. But every time something good happened, my first instinct was to call you. Every time something went wrong, I wanted to come home. To you. Rebecca's eyes were bright with unshed tears. So when Dr. Peterson told me I needed time off, the first place I thought of wasn't some beach resort or spa retreat. It was here. It was your kitchen and your laugh and the way you used to look at me like I was the most important person in the world. You were. You are. I don't know what happens next, Becca. I don't know if I can be the person you need, or if I can build a life here that feels authentic instead of like I'm hiding from the world. But I want to try. I want to figure it out with you, if you'll let me. Rebecca leaned forward and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. I'll let you, she whispered against Skye's lips. We'll figure it out together. The hawk circled once more and disappeared over the ridge, leaving them alone with the morning sun and the cats and the vast possibility of whatever came next. Chapter 7, Integration. The following weeks fell into a rhythm that felt both new and achingly familiar. Skye would wake in her own bed, they'd agreed to take things slowly, despite that first night, and walk to Rebecca's clinic for coffee before Rebecca started her rounds. She'd spend the morning reading or exploring the town that had changed in small but significant ways during her absence, then meet Rebecca for lunch when her schedule allowed. It should have felt aimless, this life without the crushing structure of hospital shifts and patient loads. Instead, it felt like learning to breathe again. You look better, Rebecca observed one Thursday afternoon as they shared a sandwich on the clinic's porch. A golden retriever named Max was recovering from surgery in the kennel behind them, his tail thumping hopefully every time Rebecca looked his way. Better how? Less like you're about to jump out of your own skin. More like you're actually inhabiting your body instead of just carrying it around. Skye considered this. I feel more like myself. Or maybe like who I used to be before I decided that being myself wasn't enough. Who were you? Before? Curious. I used to ask questions about everything. How things worked, why people made the choices they did, what would happen if we tried something different. In medical school, that was an asset. But somewhere along the way, curiosity became a liability. There were protocols to follow, hierarchies to respect. The system didn't want questions, it wanted compliance. Rebecca scratched Max behind the ears through the kennel bars. What kinds of questions are you asking now? Different ones. Like, what would happen if I stayed here? If I opened a small practice, maybe worked with you sometimes on cases that crossed over between human and veterinary medicine? Rebecca's hand stilled. You've been thinking about that? Among other things. Skye felt heat rise in her cheeks. I know it's probably not realistic. I'd need to get licensed in the state, figure out insurance, find office space. The old medical building on Elm Street has been empty for 2 years, Rebecca said quietly. Dr. Harrison retired, and no one's wanted to take over a small-town family practice. Too much work, not enough prestige. Sounds perfect. Skye. Rebecca turned to face her fully. Are you serious about this? I think so. Maybe. I don't know. Skye laughed at herself. See? I'm asking questions again instead of having all the answers. That evening, they drove out to the old medical building. It was a modest brick structure with large windows and a parking lot that needed resurfacing, but the bones were good. Through the dusty glass, Skye could see exam rooms that would need updating, a reception area that showed its age, offices that might once again hear the quiet conversations between doctor and patient. It needs work, Rebecca said, peering through a window. Everything worth having needs work. The town could use a family doctor. Dr. Harrison was well loved, but he was old school. People drive 40 minutes to the urgent care center in Greenville for things that could be handled locally. Skye tried to imagine herself here, taking blood pressures and listening to heartbeats, treating ear infections and anxiety and 1,000 small ailments that made up the bulk of primary care. It was so different from the trauma surgery that had defined her career, but maybe that was the point. Maybe healing happened in quiet moments as much as dramatic interventions. There's something else I've been thinking about, she said as they walked back to the car. What's that? You. Us. This thing we're building. Skye stopped walking and turned to face Rebecca in the parking lot. I want to do this right, Becca. I want to court you properly, the way I should have done when we were 18 and too scared to admit what we meant to each other. Rebecca's smile was radiant. Court me? What does that look like in practice? I don't know yet. But I want to find out. I want to take you on real dates, not just grab lunch between your appointments. I want to bring you flowers and write you letters and do all the romantic things I was too busy or too afraid to do before. Letters? Old-fashioned ones. With actual paper and stamps and everything. Skye felt suddenly shy. If you want that. If you want me to try. Rebecca stepped closer, close enough that Skye could see the way the sunset light caught in her hair. I want that very much. But Skye? Yeah? You don't have to prove anything to me. You don't have to be perfect or have all the answers or know exactly what you want for the next 50 years. You just have to be here, present, willing to figure it out as we go. I can do that. Good. Rebecca kissed her cheek, soft and quick. Because I plan to keep you around for a very long time. As they drove home through the gathering dusk, Skye felt something settle in her chest that she hadn't experienced in years. Not the absence of anxiety, she still had work to do on that front, but something positive and warm and forward-looking. For the first time since coming home, the future felt like a gift instead of a threat. Chapter 8, Letters and Licenses. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under Rebecca's clinic door sometime before dawn. She found it when she arrived for morning rounds, cream-colored paper, her name written in Skye's careful handwriting. Becca. Do you remember the night we stayed up until sunrise talking about what we wanted our lives to look like? You said you wanted to live somewhere you could see the stars, somewhere your work mattered to people who knew your name. I said I wanted to save the world. Turns out we were both right. You did find your stars, and your work matters every day to every farmer whose cattle you've healed, every family whose pet you've saved. And maybe saving the world looks different than I thought, maybe it's one patient at a time, one small town, one life touching another. I'm applying for my state medical license today. Dr. Harrison's building is still for sale. I think I'd like to be your neighbor on Elm Street. Love, Skye. Rebecca read it twice, then carried it with her through morning appointments, pulling it out between patients to make sure she hadn't imagined it. By lunch, she'd memorized every word. She found Skye at the courthouse, emerging from the clerk's office with a stack of papers and a slightly dazed expression. "How did it go?" Rebecca asked. "Bureaucracy is the same everywhere. Mountains of paperwork, fees for everything, and at least 6 different offices that all need to approve the same information." Skye held up the papers. "But I should be licensed within the month if everything goes smoothly." "And the building?" I called the realtor. "We're meeting Friday morning." Skye hesitated. "Want to come with me? I could use someone with good sense to tell me if I'm making a terrible mistake." "You're not making a mistake." They walked to Murphy's Market for coffee, and Skye told her about her morning, the forms she'd filled out, the references she'd contacted, the slowly forming vision she had for a practice that would bridge the gap between big city medicine and small town care. "I want to do things differently," she explained as they sat on the bench outside the market. "Longer appointments, time to actually listen to people. Preventive care, not just crisis management. Maybe some house calls for patients who can't get to the office easily." "House calls?" "Very old-fashioned." "Some old-fashioned things are worth bringing back." Skye smiled. "Speaking of which, I have something for you." She pulled a small wrapped package from her jacket pocket. Inside was a leather-bound journal with Rebecca's initials embossed on the cover. "For writing back," Skye explained. "If you want to. No pressure." Rebecca ran her fingers over the soft leather. "I love it. But I should warn you, I'm a terrible letter writer. I overthink everything." "Then don't think. Just write." That evening, Rebecca sat at her kitchen table with the journal open before her, cats purring on either side of her chair, trying to find words that matched the warm certainty in her chest. "Skye. I drove past Dr. Harrison's building after work today. The for sale sign looks different somehow, less permanent, more like a placeholder. Mrs. Chen was walking by and stopped to tell me she heard you were thinking of staying, opening a practice. She seemed pleased, said the town needs someone young and smart to take care of people. I didn't tell her that what the town really needs is for you to take care of yourself first. But I think you're starting to figure that out. I love you. Not the you I remember from high school, not the successful surgeon from New York, but the you who's sitting with uncertainty and choosing to stay anyway. The you who's brave enough to start over. Always, Becca." The letters continued, back and forth, sometimes daily, sometimes with gaps of several days. They wrote about small things, the weather, their work, books they were reading. They wrote about large things, hopes and fears, and the slow process of building something together that felt sustainable and true. The medical license came through on a Wednesday. The building inspection passed on Friday. By the end of November, Skye had signed papers and was standing in what would soon be her waiting room, surrounded by contractors and paint samples and the overwhelming reality of what she'd committed to. "Having second thoughts?" Rebecca asked, finding her there after work. "Third and fourth thoughts. But not serious ones." Skye gestured at the chaos around them. "It's going to be ready by January. I've hired a nurse practitioner, Linda Martinez. She's moving back from Richmond to be closer to her parents." "And patients?" "Dr. Harrison left me his files and his blessing. Said half his patients have been waiting for someone young enough to understand the internet but experienced enough to know when the old ways work better." Rebecca laughed. "That sounds like him." They stood together in the space that would soon hold Skye's new life, watching evening light slant through windows that would soon look out on a different future than either of them had imagined at 18. "Are you happy?" Rebecca asked. Skye considered the question seriously. "I'm getting there. Ask me again in 6 months, when I'm dealing with insurance companies and difficult patients and wondering if I've lost my mind." "I will. Every day if you want me to." "I want you to." Outside, snow began to fall, the first of the season, fat flakes that caught the light and promised the kind of winter that made spring feel like a miracle. They had months ahead of them, months of renovation and preparation and the slow work of becoming the people they wanted to be together. But standing in that empty building, watching snow dust the windows, Skye felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the quiet certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Epilogue, 1 year later. Dr. Skye Morrison's practice officially opened on a bright January morning with Mrs. Chen as her first patient and a waiting room full of flowers from Rebecca's greenhouse. By spring, she was seeing 40 patients a week and collaborating with Rebecca on several cases that required both human and veterinary expertise. The letters continued, even though they now lived in the same house, Rebecca's bungalow, expanded with a sunroom where they drank morning coffee and watched the cats chase dust motes through golden light. They wrote to each other about the small revelations of daily life, the ongoing work of choosing each other every day. On a warm evening in early October, exactly 1 year after the Harvest Festival where they'd first danced together as adults, Skye found Rebecca in the garden behind the clinic, hands deep in soil, coaxing late tomatoes toward ripeness. "I have something for you," Skye said. Rebecca looked up, dirt smudged across her cheek, eyes bright with curiosity. "Another letter?" "Something like that." Skye knelt beside her in the garden and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple gold band set with a single emerald the exact color of Rebecca's eyes. "I know we said we'd take things slow," Skye began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "But I also know that some things are worth waiting for, and some things are worth committing to completely. I love you, Becca. I love the life we're building together, the way you make me laugh, the way you see beauty in ordinary moments. I love that you saved me without trying to fix me." Rebecca's hands were shaking as she wiped dirt from her fingers. "Will you marry me?" Skye asked. "Will you let me love you for the rest of whatever time we have?" "Yes," Rebecca whispered, then louder, "Yes, of course, yes." The ring fit perfectly, catching the last light of the setting sun. Around them, the garden hummed with the quiet contentment of things growing in their proper season, and in the distance, the lights of Milbrook Valley twinkled like earthbound stars. They had found their way home, not to a place, but to each other, to the people they were meant to become. And that, Skye thought as she kissed her fiancé in a garden full of late-blooming flowers, was worth every detour it had taken to get here. The end.